He's making a way every day. He opened the door, go in. Whatever you want, go get it. He's got a plan, go live it. He's making a way. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Community Updates. This evening, we have a hot topic. We're going to be talking about trauma, adverse childhood experiences, and the effect that these things have on the church. And we're going to be talking about the 1619 Project, which is a wonderful book, and even how some of the traumas and things that happened for people of color and during slavery time, and how those things still affect us today. So get ready to tune in. You're here, you're tuned in, and we thank you for tuning in to Community Updates. So I'm your host, Michelle White. And we have our therapist, my co host, Miss Regina Hall, who's a licensed therapist, who is here to help you, who is here to, you can call in and get some answers to some of your questions. Share your experiences. Let people know there's too many people out here killing themselves. And we had a gentleman sitting in a corner today in college because something was going on in his mind and he perched himself in a corner. Get on the phone, call. This is an opportunity for you to call in and have someone to talk to. We have Pastor Keyon Payton, who from New Bethel Missionary Baptist Church, who's going to be sharing some things with us today. And we have Miss Vanessa Harris, who is also going to be sharing some things with us today. So the number here is area code 313-355-6018. Again, that number is 313-355-6018. And you know, we always like to give a little bit of information on community updates. We're going to get right into this. I'm not going to give a lot of information on some of the things. And if I do, I'll do it towards the end because this is important. This is really important. There's too much going on. I've got stuff going on in my life. Everybody's got something going on.
Yes.
And we need to help one another. We need to be talking to one another. And we that are of the household of faith, whatever that faith is, we need to be helping, discipling, doing something other than talking about it just in our small conversations. So we're here today on a large platform because this goes around the world. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and all social media platforms. And so we thank you for tuning in, and we want you to give us a call tonight. We want you to share this with somebody. Don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe as you're watching. But please go and share this right now with someone on your social media to tune in right now to Community Updates and Enlightened Hearts, because we are Enlightened Hearts here to help you.
Yes.
So, Pastor Keyon Payton, tell us a little bit about yourself and you're pastor of New Bethel Missionary Baptist Church, and how did you come to start the church? And tell us a little bit about your story there, how you came to become a pastor. And
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you, Michelle, for this very wonderful invitation for us to come and to share on this excellent platform. Thank you for your advocacy and support for informing our community on issues where our residents can receive the resources that they need to help themselves and their families. So thank you for this invitation. It's an honor to be here.
My pleasure.
So I have had the honor of serving as the senior pastor of New Bethel Missionary Baptist Church in Pontiac for the last 16 years. Actually, this upcoming Sunday is my 16th anniversary.
Oh, happy anniversary.
And thank you.
Happy anniversary.
So the church is actually not one that I founded. New Bethel is 98 years old, and it's actually the church that I was born and raised in. I started preaching at a very young age. I was 13 when I was called to ministry. I did my initial sermon at the age of 14, and so in June it will be 30 years in ministry.
13 years old. Wow.
Yes, indeed. So the Lord He has been kind over the years. Actually the calling was inspired by a series of traumatic events that had happened in my life. And I had a dream one night, and it was a two-part dream. In the first part of the dream, I saw myself in a casket, and folks were walking around viewing my body at Cobb Funeral Home in Pontiac. And in the second part of the dream, I was standing in the pulpit of the church that I now pastor. And so for me, it was the Lord saying, continue to go down this path that you're going down, and it ultimately will lead to destruction. or you can turn your life around. And so I chose to do the latter, and here I am. Now having been pastor of New Bethel for 16 years, and I'm still, thanks be unto God, living the dream.
Well, that is wonderful. And you are living the dream. I've had an opportunity to come over to your church and sing and just hear you. You're very transparent. And that's so needed today for us to remain transparent. We all have different things that go on in our lives. And we're going to be talking about ITEJ and the organization in which you started and founded. And tell us what ITEJ stands for again.
The Institute of Trauma and Economic Justice.
Yes, the Institute of Trauma and Economic Justice. That is such a wonderful thing because I had an opportunity to come to your conference last year, and it was phenomenal with all of the people, social workers and people of different in that arena that were sharing, and you have a chance to share because we broke out into different groups, and as well as hear from professionals in the arena that were giving excellent information on some of the adverse childhood experiences and how to deal with some of these things. And being a therapist, I know you deal with it and talk to people all of the time that have different traumas and things going on in their lives.
Yeah.
So you have a testimony that I've heard you share a little bit about in the pulpit. And those types of things need to be shared. We all have a testimony.
Yes.
We all have some trauma that has happened. Well, many of us.
That's right.
I've got some. You got some?
For sure.
You got some?
I sure do.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah.
But nobody's talking about it.
Sure.
We keep it real quiet. We in the church oftentimes make ourselves seem perfect, and that's the problem. Because then people don't feel comfortable to talk to us. I cannot tell you how many people that I've spoken to that have stopped coming to church because people aren't talking. A lady told me yesterday, I went to a church and I was there for years, and nobody spoke to me. But that happens a lot.
Wow.
And people don't have anyone that they feel they can talk to. But God told us to confess our faults one to another.
That's right.
Why?
That's
So
right.
we can be healed.
That's right.
Yes.
But
That's
I don't
right.
need you to talk about it and then spread gossip.
Right.
Yep.
If
Right.
you're going to help me, help me. If you're going to pray
Yes.
for me, pray for me.
Exactly.
But don't just pray for me. Tell me what to pray. Show
Amen.
me how to pray so that I can get them demons up off of me.
Yes.
Because that's all it is. This is a spiritual battle going on. Our fight is what? Not against flesh and blood.
That's right.
But we have to keep that in mind, that it is a spiritual battle. So, Pastor Keyon, tell me, I heard you share a little bit about some of the testimony that you have and some of the things that led you to even probably start the ITEJ organization, of which you have an upcoming event
Yes.
on March the 31st, but we're going to talk more about that as well.
All right.
Because I want to see, I've been spreading the word and telling as many people as I can, especially people in the industry,
Yeah.
to come.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I mentioned in my preliminary remarks that the first part of my dream was lying in a casket. Because I was engaging in a number of self-destructive activities. And I've most recently become trained as a master trainer or trainers in adverse childhood experiences. And we now understand, and it has been confirmed with scientific evidence, that adversity in early childhood, when left untreated, can often cause later in life consequences. It leads to substance abuse addictions, violence, sexual addictions, sexually transmitted diseases, suicides, incarceration, all the things that we work hard in society to address. We now know that the underlying root of that is untreated childhood trauma. And the ACE study, which was conducted by Dr. Robert Anda in the 1990s, has now been corroborated with other areas of studies with respect to neuroscience as well as epigenetics, where through all of these various fields of scientific studies and research, we now know the consequences of the traumas that we endure and the realities when we don't have those treated. And so for me, my early childhood adversity started with sexual childhood abuse. I was molested by my uncle who had mental illness, and I was 5 years old. And that lasted for about 5 years. And because he was a family member, a close family member, a loved one, I didn't know that I was being sexually abused. I actually learned that it was sexual abuse in school. And so when I learned in school that I had been sexually abused by my loved one, I came home from school very angry, and I confronted him. And I said, God is going to get you for what you did to me. And literally, he died shortly thereafter. And I never shared that with anyone with respect to what he had done. And so for a number of years, I lived with disenfranchised grief. And that in the stages of grief, we know that the first stage is anger. And so as a child, because I did not tell anyone, I didn't feel safe to tell anyone. I loved my loved one. My family loved him. And when he was deceased, I wanted my family to have the best memories of him. And so I did not share the traumatic experience that I had, or the suffering that I had, feeling like I somehow cursed him. And so that led me to a number of bad behaviors. I was kicked out of a number of different schools, etc. And when my mother couldn't do anything with me, she was going to send me to the juvenile home. And my grandmother said, you can't send him to the juvenile home. Why don't you just send him down there to live with his father for a while? And it was there in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, in 1993, that a terrible tropical storm swept through Fort Walton Beach, Florida, where my father was stationed at Eglin Air Force Base. And I was home alone at 13. The power went out, the house was shaking, the thunder was roaring, and the lightning was flashing. And, and there I was, 13, in a wooded area, and terrified. And I called out to the Lord and said, if you save me through the night, I'll do whatever you want me to do. And that was the night that I had that dream. And because I chose to do differently, here I am today. But because I still didn't address the traumas, it still led to sexual conflict. And being in the church, born and raised, we know the reality of how persons who have sexual conflict struggle with being open and honest about that struggle because of the religious fundamentalism that exists in the church around the stigma of homosexuality. And that led to a number of challenges for me in my life over the years.
Yeah. If I could just say something, I appreciate you telling, your story, and just even knowing that you are male and you're sharing is really powerful, because so many times, particularly males, females, we talk, and even in the church we talk. There still may be insecurities in the church when you share with another female, or a female, or people may say, God doesn't, He don't put too much on you that you can bear, right? But the fact that you are coming out with this, and there's some similarities in our story. And so when you talk about the sexual abuse, when you talk about the struggle with your sexual identity, I'm wondering what was it that forced you to start dealing with it? Because most of the time you are running.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I really say that, I attended Morehouse College. And when I was there, it was an all-male college. And so what you're referencing is the toxic masculinity of our culture, which often times causes men not to want to be open and honest and transparent about the things that happen to us. And at Morehouse, I went in, boy preacher, and I was a Bible thumper. And for those who were expressing openly their sexual identity outside of heterosexuality, I was condemning them to hell. And really, it was my own conflict. It was my religious teachings, but also my own struggles of not wanting to accept the struggles that I was having, that I projected that hate onto others. And so really, at my time at Morehouse, it was the cosmopolitan ethics of the founding dean of Morehouse College, Dean Lawrence Edward Carter Sr., who's still at Morehouse, will be attending our event next week.
Oh, wonderful.
Who helped me to understand God and the love of God that we know conquers all. And from that, it gave me a path to begin to learn how to love myself, at which time I became a lot more open and transparent with my close friends. I didn't share that information I never wore anything on my sleeve, but I've always been very open, honest, and transparent about my life and my struggles. And when the opportunities presented themselves, I would share. And what I later learned in my pastorate at New Bethel, and particularly in 2020, there were a number of young men in the community who had come with their own sexual conflict and struggle, who many of whom felt a calling to ministry, but because of their sexual identity and struggle that they shared with me, they didn't feel that they were worthy of being able to accept the call of God upon their lives. And so just hearing them in that capacity, I began to open up and to share my own story and testimony, which of course created vulnerability for me because you're speaking to a community of people who did not know, and you're the pastor, and you have the stigma in the church around the issue, and oftentimes that was met with persons who wanted to exploit that truth and use it for manipulative purposes. And so in 2020, someone actually created a fictitious flyer saying, "Dear New Bethel, please help. The pastor got me drunk and high and made me have sex with him, and I was a minor." And of course, that went viral, and it was devastating to me personally, caused depression and triggered my own traumas, which ultimately led me to the hospital for 5 days. But by the grace of God and my own studies in adverse child experiences and the love and support of people close to me, my church members, who I praise God for, who love me through those struggles. I was divorced as a consequence of that situation. I had to engage not only an attorney, but also law enforcement, who at the time came to me and said, "Pastor, there's so much going on in the world. Unfortunately, we have to investigate this." So I said, "Good. I know I'm not, out here, with these allegations that are currently around me and my life." And so that investigation, which cleared my name with the law, unfortunately,
which is
did not
frightening.
do so.
Unfortunately, it can be very frightening.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. But of course, the rumor mill, the gossip mill, there's still people that will believe whatever they want to
That's
believe
true.
about whatever. But that was very, very challenging for me. But it also, getting through that with my faith and with my loved ones and support, it developed a level of courage where I just decided to just come out and self-identify as being bisexual. I've never really said that out loud, that I was bisexual, until I was forced at that point to be able to just say, "You know what, that level of exploitation and manipulation took me to such a low place, I will never go back to that low place again." And so just for my own sanity and self-protection, I gave people the label that I thought they needed and wanted to hear, just so that I could clear the air. And I'm still working through who I am as a man, who I am as a person. I still believe in marriage. I still believe in the traditional family. And I'm still working through that. But I praise God and thank God that I was able to share that, to give me the freedom to not have to worry about that level of struggle anymore.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Just one more question, if you don't mind. I really
Thank you for sharing
appreciate, your story.
That's
And
vulnerable.
yeah, very vulnerable.
Transparency.
And just even, in the things that you talked about in adverse child experiences, the trauma. I don't think oftentimes the sexuality is put with it, the sexual identity. I think we can talk about the drugs, we can talk about, the promiscuity, but in terms of dealing with a sexual crisis, your identity crisis, that's not really talked about. And I had to work through that. I worked through it, and the Lord helped me to understand that I love males, and I love women. I love a woman appropriately by looking at what God says, just through my healing process, and that I have always loved men. But when I was going through that, and it had me totally messed up. And I talk about it in my book that I actually brought a copy for you that talks about Mommy, I Need You.
Okay.
And what happened is that my mom didn't believe me that I was sexually abused by the next door neighbor.
Wow.
And so there was no belief around it. So I walked around for years thinking I was a liar.
Sure.
And so when you don't tell anybody, or when you tell someone and then they don't believe you,
Absolutely.
it caused all type of problems. And so I just praise God for your healing and how you still working through it. And so thank you for sharing that. It's just really dear to my heart too,
How did you
to be
do
healed.
yours?
Through the Lord just really one day I just, I kept having these thoughts, things like what you said. I had anxiety. I didn't want to, I didn't even want to watch TV because these things were out there. They were just starting though, because it was Alice's show. And could something be so small? It was Alice. I don't know if you guys ever seen the show Alice.
I remember that show.
And the guy told her he was gay. And so I went to my dad and I said, Dad, am I gay? And he was like, get that out your mind.
Because they weren't things that we talked about.
Right.
Sure.
It
That's
wasn't.
right.
I
That's
kind of
right.
knew some gay people when I was younger, but it was kind of in the closet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for real in the closet. So now it's out in the open.
Yeah, right.
But how do we deal with it, and how do we? Because you have to love people.
That's right.
Yeah.
And people that are going through those things, they love the Lord just like we love the Lord.
That's right.
And they love the Lord.
That is so true. And
It's a spirit.
yes.
And people have to recognize, and I know I've talked to many people, I was born this way. Look, God ain't confused. He knows how he created. Now, I do know a morphodite that has both the Y and X and Y chromosome. And when we were children, she chose to be a girl. As she grew older and understood what was going on in her body, now she's a man. There are very few people like that. But I'm not going to stand in judgment of when people say they're this. God says we draw people by our love.
That's right.
So no matter what they choose to be, we have to still love them.
That's right.
I don't have to see I will say this. In our society today, because it is that spirit is trying to take over, do you, but don't make me do you.
Sure.
Okay?
Well,
I don't want to do you.
So I
I
want to
want
push
to
back
see
a
it
little
on
bit.
on the commercials and everything.
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank you, Regina, for sharing, and we have synergy there as well. Oftentimes, when you try to tell your truth and it's rejected, it causes you to your wall goes up to protect yourself, right? And then you have that struggle. In 2012, I experienced that, trying to share that with my family. My mother in particular, who did not meet that well and told me that I was lying about my truth, and it plunged me into a deep depression, and to the point of it being a spirit. I think what we're dealing with right now is that is a spirit that when you're rejected and a person feels like they don't know who they are because they disclose information to loved ones and then they have to be isolated. Mark chapter 5, the man who was self-harming himself in the graveyard.
Right.
He was isolated and removed from his family. We don't know what caused that level of isolation. We don't know what caused that level of mental illness. Of course, the scripture talks about he was filled with demons, many demons, that Jesus named it, and it was legion. But they didn't have psychotherapists.
But
Right.
those
in Jesus'
legions
day.
were a spirit, and he was filled with them. Didn't you just say he was filled
Absolutely,
with
but the point I'm trying to make, though, is that because we didn't have the science that we have today, the information, the knowledge,
identified.
they didn't know how to name it. They didn't know how to label it. And so a lot of times when things were, if you were a leper, you had you had a spirit, right? It was you were
Or
not
you were put isolated.
perceived to be exactly.
But that was a sickness because people didn't want to catch it.
Right.
It was something that was transferable.
Well, but I mean, yeah, and you kind of left my story hanging out there a little, so I just want to clear it up. So when you asked about how, so I actually to Vanessa and you, I went to my pastor, and he said, I said, do I have to? I was just 12 years old. I said, do I have to have sex in order to know who I am? He said, have it once, don't ever do it again, and you'll know. Well, that started a series of me being promiscuous.
Sure.
Because I did not know. So
Well, I don't know if that was the best advice.
it was it was a terrible advice.
Absolutely.
And that was
that
from your
started.
pastor?
This was from a pastor. He's gone on, and so not being believed, going to a pastor. I thank God that I'm even a reverend. Because knowing what God did in me and
Sure.
through me now, I have the ability to counsel appropriately and effectively. And I think that's the problem. People preach God,
That's right.
but they have not really allowed God to show them how to to show God's people how to get through trauma, how to get through losses, how to get through divorce, how to get through anything.
right.
The church preaches, but they're not equipped.
And the truth be told, and I've been in ministry for 30 years, and I know some of the biggest, I know a lot of clergy.
Correct.
And because of my level of transparency, I also know a lot about a lot of clergy.
Amen.
And oftentimes we say that, "Ooh, he's a man of God and he's so filled with the Spirit and anointed." And that pastor is also struggling with sexual identity. And because that pastor hasn't been able to clearly understand it for himself or herself, lives in the closet. You mentioned it a moment ago. And there are a number, I don't call people's names because it's not, we should never
That's right.
call people out.
That's right.
Everyone has their own journey.
That's right.
And but people would be surprised if we were to do the roll call of persons who have sexual conflict.
And that's men and women.
And it's men and women.
And that's in the church.
Absolutely.
It's a lot.
Absolutely.
And the men get identified or conversation.
Exactly.
But there's tons of women in
Well,
the
because
church.
it was allowed back in the day, it was socially acceptable, and actually men wanted women
to have twosomes and threesomes.
Exactly.
And,
So
all of that.
we don't talk about those things. We don't talk about how people process those things.
Right.
And I think
Amen.
these types of settings where we can break the silence allows for us to begin to open a dialogue where we can actually shed light to the issue, and in seeing the issue for what it is, that gives us the ability to be able to address it. And a lot of times things have been in the dark, and in Ephesians chapter 5, it talks about what happens when things are done in the dark, right?
It's going to come
And so
to
we
the
have to
light.
expose those things so that we can name those things and then be able to address those things in an appropriate manner so people can begin to get the healings that they need. And that's what ITEJ ultimately really is about.
That's
Now,
very-
go ahead.
And then we have the healing circles that Pastor Keyon wants to bring about through New Bethel and through ITEJ. And that's what's so important right now, like you said, to be able to have these type of conversations very
Yes.
openly and in a spirit of love. You're not trying to judge, you're not trying to, condemn people, but you're trying to make a safe environment for people to come forth. I wanted to share also my background in regards to, I was also molested at 8 years old by my step grandfather. And I did share it with my family. And they were, his wife, which was my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, she just kind of, okay, let me, I'll, take care of it kind of a thing. And it didn't stop. And I began to just be really avoiding the situation. But then later on, come to find out that this man had went through my family. There were cousins that came forth. There were aunties that came forth.
And that
Of course-
happens a lot, especially when families from the South.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And they were from
Exactly.
Georgia and Mississippi.
But that's the legacy of slavery, too.
Exactly.
Yes. And that's
Okay.
what
I was going to bring the
1619.
1619.
Oh, my goodness.
Exactly.
right.
That's why I put it back to you.
Right.
Go ahead. Take it, Vanessa.
Take it, Vanessa.
All right.
So it's a lot that we have to, unload. And ask God to help us. And I even had a family situation where it was huge when the word came out that this man was molesting his daughter, and she told family members, and then the police arrested him, and then when she didn't press charges on him. He got out and killed 3 people.
Oh, my.
Jesus.
He killed her, the grandfather, and an auntie. So that's where we got to really ask God. Now, we can't be scared. He hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but we can't allow the enemy to just run rampant
That's right.
in our homes and in our families. So we have to ask God for wisdom. And how do we deal with these things in a spirit of love and to have the law or whatever, the therapists and the people licensed to help us.
Sure. And one thing about that too, Vanessa, is that when a lot of times when people have those types of sexual promiscuity, typically it is rooted in their own childhood adversity that's been left untreated.
Yes.
And what I want to get to is how, and we'll talk about this next week with one of our panels, is how if a person has been sexually abused and assaulted in their own life, and it plays out in a way where they become sexually promiscuous or begin to assault others sexually. In our current society, they too are often isolated or sent to prison, and when they're going to prison, they don't get the type of help and treatment that caused them to do the things that they did in the first place. And one of the things about adverse childhood experiences, the founder, Dr. Robert Anda, who will be our featured guest on next Friday and lecturing, he often says we need to stop asking people, what's wrong with you? Because a lot of times when people do things and we don't like their behavior, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? And we need to stop asking people what's wrong with you. And we need to start asking people what happened to you.
That's right.
Because when we begin to ask people what happened to you, that is how we can begin to uncover the root cause of a lot of their maladaptive treatment or maladaptive behaviors that often are resulted from their maltreatment in their own childhood adversity.
Yeah, and I really appreciate what you're saying. I think the other part of that, when I was growing up, one of the things you would hear often was that if you are sexually abused, then you can only go out and abuse someone. That was the most scariest information, to know that as a child that happened to me, and now people telling me I'm gonna do it.
Right.
I think that we have to be careful with that information. The healing power of God to release me, because I was so afraid, and I put that in my book too, to touch and to hold babies, to be around them, because people telling me that I'm gonna do that.
Absolutely.
And they not personally telling me that,
Absolutely.
but that's the information that was out there. I think information has to get out there correctly.
Absolutely.
And people have to know that minds are being influenced in ways that they don't even understand.
Exactly.
And once they get the knowledge, the Bible says that once we get knowledge, we are set free.
Yes.
So we cannot be set free. We can't be set free if people don't know how to give the knowledge.
Exactly.
And to give it in a way that's touching and changing lives. And that's why I do what I do. I actually want to deal with the distortions that people are dealing with in their lives. And to think that God is using me to deal with distortions is so powerful, because here it was, I was all bogged down in distortions, and now God delivered me.
Sure.
And we're dealing with distortions, but the prince of the air, I mean, he is a distorted being.
Absolutely.
So
But you
I'll
said
stop
a key
there.
thing that God delivered you.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be here if God didn't deliver me. I believe that God delivers people in various ways.
Right.
And everybody has their story. And I think those are the things that need to be heard.
Absolutely.
I want to invite people that are listening right now to call in at 313-355-6018. Somebody out there is listening and has some things going on. Maybe they've been touched. Maybe someone has done something to them and they haven't had an opportunity to share it with someone. I love this discussion that we're having because it needs to be talked about. And I'm sitting over here listening and smiling because I don't want to be like I haven't had any adverse childhood experiences either. But for me, mine was a little different. And I'm getting ready to share something on this radio that my family doesn't know. And because I didn't tell anybody. But I was also touched by a relative when I was 5 years old. But see, I liked it.
Well, you were a child.
I was a child.
You were a child.
And but because I liked it, it caused other perversions to occur in my life later on.
Sure.
Because a perverted spirit then was on me.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's a different, and these things are spirits.
But it was a mental imprint. So when you've never had any exposure to sexual activity, and early childhood is you're a sponge. You're
All
receiving
right.
all of this information
That's
very
right.
quickly, and it forms your identity. We talk about identity. Your identity is formed in your earlier childhood years,
That's right.
and once that is formed, it's a pattern that's hard to break who you have been formed to be.
Yes.
So if you've never had, that's why abstinence is so critically important, and that's why we have to protect our children from not being exposed prematurely to sexual encounters. Because when they have that very first one and their minds are not mature, that experience leaves a lasting imprint in their minds that they feel that that's what it's supposed to be. And that's what we really have to get to the root to. And so that's why I'm pushing back, because I'm a pastor. I've been in this thing for 30 years, and I don't want us to be so quick to just say that everything is a spirit, because while there are spirits, a lot of it is mental, and how we have been exposed to things and how our brains. Dr. Anda, I'm a master trainer of trainers and aces, and we do a presentation called a NEAR presentation. NEAR is an acronym, NEAR. The N stands for neuroscience, because your brain is actually rewired
All right.
from the experiences that you encounter in your early life. And it's
totally
hard to
agree.
you can rewire
I
it.
agree.
But it's a process of getting that brain to be rewired,
But then
and it
where's
can't happen
the battle?
without a free space.
The battle is here.
It's
It's
in the mind.
The battle is in the
Let
mind.
this
in the mind.
So those
mind be in
neural,
you.
which was also
That's
in
right.
Christ Jesus, but because of those neural traumas and things that happen as a child, it can cause you to get involved in other traumatic things down the road
Absolutely.
that could lead to jail, prison, drugs, blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
and
but
so
I
I
think-
had those experiences.
Right.
But for me, I had to say, okay, God, when did this come in? I had to cry out to God.
That's right.
I had to get to the root
There you
of
go.
it. I had forgotten all about the 5-year-old
And
experience.
a lot of people forget.
Yeah.
See, that's it.
That's
And,
it.
and I, well, I
Protection.
And a lot of people
remembered,
don't even know.
but I
Yeah,
didn't
that's true.
think about that.
That's right.
But I said, Lord, I need you to tell me, where did the root come?
That's right.
How did I get here?
That's right.
With all these other traumas and drugs and blah 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 and sexual promiscuity and it wasn't just sexual, it was perversion.
That's right.
Okay, and I had to say, I need to know where the root is, and I had to, for me, everybody has a different story.
That's right.
For me, and I'm a minister, been a minister for over 20 years, I had to say, I need to get it out of me, and I had to beg, plead, cry, snot,
Yep.
fast, pray, get this out of me, but show me where the root is.
Exactly.
And so God showed me where the root
There you go.
of where that came in
There you go.
when I was 5.
And where was the root? When you were a child.
When I was a child,
And-
and that was an adverse childhood
you go.
experience, and that caused other traumas down the road
There you go.
in my life.
That's right.
And that's what, thank you so much for sharing that, Michelle, because I believe that talking about this, and it really does help people to understand that
And thank
they
you for sharing,
are,
Michelle.
yeah, they are
Who
rewired.
my family
That
gonna
we
call me.
that we are rewired, right? That as a child you don't understand what's going on, and most rapes happen by people you know, and so when they put it out there that it's a traumatic experience, it doesn't have to be.
Exactly.
I mean, it
Exactly.
doesn't
Not
have to
traumatic
be.
in the way that we think
Exactly.
It's
It's not like you out there on the street and somebody pulled up with a gun,
Exactly.
and that's
Right.
that's the way they give it to you
Exactly.
on television constantly. That's not the way it happened most of the time.
Exactly.
It's a trusted individual
That's right.
that is that is manipulating and taking advantage.
Or a game.
That's
it's a
right.
plaything. It's a game.
But now here's I want to tie some things into what
Sure.
Vanessa said, and let me know if we have callers. But because of what you just said, how do we? Because you don't want to. You can't just rip it off like that.
No.
Because you have a lot of people
Well,
who
God
have
did me,
fears
but
of
you're
being
right.
exposed.
Yeah, I got
I'm not
delivered
talking about
from
ripping
it.
off.
Yeah.
I'm saying that we know that oftentimes it's trusted loved ones.
Yeah.
But some people are listening to this call right now and they're scared
Yeah.
because they're that loved one that's doing something to somebody in their home right now. And the more we begin to talk about this, they're becoming afraid and don't know what to do. And we don't want people, killing and doing other types of things because they don't want to be exposed. And so as we begin to address this issue, we also must realize that just as adamant as we are in wanting to stop it and prevent it, we also have to know that we need safe spaces for people to actually be able to also acknowledge and have a way to be redeemed. So redemption in this, right? God died for everybody. All of us, every
So how
criminal.
do we help get some of this reconciliation to happen in the churches? And before we do run out of time, I want you to share from the 1619 Project. You have a wonderful book club where we're going through. I'm a part of that book club, and we're reading the 1619 Project. What is the author's name of that book?
Nicole Hannah Jones.
Yes.
Yes.
And your particular book club is comprised of a diverse group of people, of various cultures, various religions, Jews and Catholics and Christians, Presbyterians, some of everybody. So you're getting a different perspective or various perspectives from different culturally diverse people, and it's wonderful. And a lot of these traumas happen when we just mentioned a few minutes ago that through slavery there was always uncles and this and other, it happened. And these are things that still happen. And things get pushed up under the rug, and people become afraid to speak about them.
Right.
But when I come to the church, I'm expecting some love.
There you
Again,
go.
we have to show love.
Yeah.
We can't
That's true.
push people aside or
That's
make
right.
them feel isolated.
That's right.
They already feel isolated
That's right.
inside.
That's right.
Our job, the Bible says you draw people by your love.
That's right.
And not no fake love.
That's right.
Real love.
Real love.
Some real love. That means, I love that the type of ministry things that I do in the jails and prisons and shelters and blah, 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 I'm touching the untouchable. I'm having opportunity to love the unlovable. People that you wouldn't want to touch and
Right.
you wouldn't want to care about and
who
you walk
need to be
past
touched.
and need to be touched and
That's
need
right.
to be loved because they're people too.
That's right.
But guess what?
Look,
That's
preacher,
what God told us all to
you
do.
gonna let Vanessa answer?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Tell us about the 16
Preach
nights.
it.
I love it.
You never
Thank
get
you.
a preacher to mic, right?
That's right. Thank you, woman of God.
I
That
know,
was
right?
excellent. That
It was. I was like, she about ready to breathe.
That's right.
Right. Oh my goodness.
But the 1619 Project, if you have not gotten that book,
Yes.
you have got to get the book.
Yes.
Now I want you to know though, it's a difficult read.
Yeah.
You cannot read that book alone. That's why the book club is so important and powerful, because again, we're talking healing circles.
Yes.
We're talking people coming together and expressing their thoughts and then realizing, oh my God, I didn't know that history. And a lot of the history, we think that because Nicole Hannah Jones is African American, that, she's just talking about slavery. No, we're talking about the United States American history. The things that happened through our presidents during the Reconstruction era. So tons of information.
Yeah.
This book is it's like a documentary. Where it's different authors that have put together a compilation of their essays. These are subject matter experts.
Yeah.
Okay, rather we're talking democracy, race, fear, capitalism, the church. It's 18 chapters, and every week on Tuesdays, I'm inviting you to please join us for 1 hour from 6 to 7 p.m. on Tuesday evenings, and I'm very prompt. And we start
starts exactly
at
6 o'clock and
we
ends
end
at 7.
at 7.
And how do people get in touch with you if they want to become a part of the 1619 Project?
I will give my
Book
phone
club.
number out because, or
Your
they can
email.
email me.
Give
Let
your
me
email.
let me do the email. My email address is V as in Victory, F as in Frank, 1102
Oh, that's good.
at sbcglobal.net.
Repeat that for us.
V as in Victory, F as in Frank, 1102 at sbcglobal.net.
That's good.
And I'm telling you, it's
wonderful.
phenomenal.
It's awesome.
It really is. And we need to bridge the divide that has happened between cultures,
Yes.
churches. It's not about religion.
No.
It's not.
It's
I'm
not.
getting ready to go on a fast tomorrow with a woman that's a Muslim, and she's doing Ramadan.
Yeah.
Yes.
She can read her whatever
Yes.
and I'm going to read whatever I read.
That's right.
But we can come together
Yes.
and exercise
That's right.
together and be,
Yes.
of one, be loving to
Amen.
one another.
That's the
Yes.
beloved
That-
community.
yeah.
That's
Yes.
the beloved community.
Yes.
That's right.
And we did that last year. We were invited to a Ramadan dinner,
Mm-hmm.
and there was an interfaith table. There were 2 tables that had Christians, the Muslim community. I mean, it was just phenomenal. And
Well, in your book club, you've got some of everyone.
Oh, yes, and I
there.
love it. I mean,
Yes.
because we need each other.
We do.
We have to stop kidding ourselves that we're just a silo and we're out here by ourselves. No, we need the resources that are out there from our different ethnicities and communities.
Yeah.
Actually, I've been invited this Friday to a Shabbat dinner. And I'm
Oh,
so looking
wonderful.
forward to that. This will be my
Which is
second
part
one.
of the Jewish
Exactly.
Yeah.
culture.
Yes.
So tell
You
us
know-
now, you got the ITEJ event coming up this next Friday,
Yes,
the
ma'am.
31st of March.
I registered.
I did
Right.
too.
All right.
I've registered as well.
All right.
Well, I've been sending it out. I told you to everyone.
And it's
All right.
free.
And it's
Yeah,
free.
it is free.
So
It's
tell
free.
people how they can go and register, please. They can go to your website.
Yeah, well, actually, so our website is www.itej.org. And now that you said that, we probably do need to put that our QR code on our website. But the primary way to register is through the Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network's website. They are our major partner, who is primarily handling the registration process. So if persons go to Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network on their site, they can look up events and they'll find our ITEJ Bring Together Detroit event that's taking place next Friday, March the 31st. Our breakfast is being sponsored by Liberty Bank. There is a branch here in Detroit. Liberty is originally in New Orleans, but they're the largest black-owned bank in the country. And so they're sponsoring breakfast, which will be served from 8 to 9 while people are registering. And then we're going to start right at 9 o'clock. Lunch will be served later in the day. And then the program will end at about 4:30 in the afternoon. So it literally is an all-day event. But the way that it's structured, it is going to be a lot of information, a lot of activity. We'll have a lecture by the lead expert and founder of the ACE study, Dr. Robert Anda, and his partner, Laura Porter. We're going to have panel discussions on how ACEs impact public health. We talk about underlying health conditions. COVID exposed the reality that there's so many health disparities in the African American community. Well, we know from 1619 and others that slavery and that stress that we have endured as a people through slavery and civil rights and segregation and even Black Lives Matter and what we're even seeing today in so many of our
So sad,
news
yes.
cycles where black people are being killed in the street. That's stress on top of the stresses of normal life
Exactly.
that impacts us and is wired not only in our brains but also alters our DNA. And you'll learn about how our DNA is altered as a result of trauma and stress in this event. And so we'll have experts from various fields of study, and then we're having a panel on public safety, how ACEs impact public safety. We know that untreated childhood trauma is the lead public health and safety crisis in the country. And if anyone is concerned about mental health, you want to be a part of this conference.
Yeah.
There's limited space. We're going to be at Huntington Tower, which is Huntington Bank's new headquarters downtown Detroit. It's on the 20th floor, which is breathtaking. Just being up there.
It's not in the old Coble Hall.
It's
gonna
not
be
in. It's not in Huntington Place, which
Okay.
is the old Coble Hall.
Okay.
It's in Huntington Tower,
Okay.
which is the new headquarters of Huntington Bank, downtown Detroit at 2025 Woodward. But all the registration information, again, is available at Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network. And I will be working with our staff with ITEJ to see how we might be able to get registration information, that link even on ITEJ's website as well.
And
Real
this
quick,
is
I
good
just
for. Go
wanted,
ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we didn't leave your response or your question hanging about, how do we deal with people who or help people who are the ones that are doing the sexual abuse.
Sure.
And you didn't get to finish that, I don't think.
Well, I'll just share a story. Here in the Metro Detroit area recently, there was a 14-year-old who was being sexually abused by his father. He called the police showed up. When they got there and went into the basement, which was the dad's man cave where the wife couldn't go, they discovered that it was a sex dungeon where this 14-year-old had been sexually abused by his father and other men who his father was inviting in to these sexual experiences with his son.
Jesus.
And the question that I raised, while that is very egregious, and we need to protect children from those types of experiences, my question was, what if that father, after touching his son the very first time, said, something is wrong with me, and I don't want to experience these things?
Sorry.
Then at what point what is that person's recourse for going to get help? Because currently, if that father were to say, hey, this happened, I don't want it to happen anymore, the only recourse is you going to prison.
That's
and
true.
that child is going to be removed from your custody. So we have to figure out a way where persons can have safe spaces to want to be able to heal. And I don't think that currently our prison system and our criminal justice system is the answer for those persons who are looking for that type of help.
It is definitely not. I work in the prisons, two of the prisons, both Huron Valley and Macomb County Correctional Facility, as well as Wayne County Jails and Oakland County Jails. And I was just at a training that we had on Monday, and the officer was saying that the people that are the wards where the people have mental traumas, they really shouldn't be there. It's not the place for them.
That's right.
But because they don't understand and because they can be of detriment to other people, that's why they're there. But that's really not where they belong.
Yeah, and
But
I
this
think
trauma, I just wanted to say that the ITEJ event coming up is not just for people in the social work field.
That's right.
The information that was given and will be given this next Friday, the 31st, is for anybody working in the community. Anybody working with, like you said, you signed up, but you're in the field. I work in the field, in the shelters, in the prisons, in the communities, and the information, because we need to help to know how to better understand people and better deal with people. If you're in anything where you're working with the community, working in ministry,
That's right.
working with people,
That's right.
I encourage you to sign up for
Sure.
the event next Friday, March 31st. Go to itej.org.
That's for information for the Institute of Trauma and Economic Justice. I don't know how quick of a turnaround I'll be able to get the link for registration. So we're directing people to the largest behavioral health organization for Detroit, and that is the Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network.
Okay.
So if they were to do a simple Google search on Detroit Wayne
Integrated
Health Network, DWIN is the acronym for it. They'll be able to get the information. I believe, is that the website?
Yes.
Whatever the acronym is for what we
yeah.
just said, DWIHN.org.
Yes.
That's the website for registration.
And then also, if they were to go to your page,
Yes,
you
I
know, you
posted
can-
it on my
yeah,
page.
Flyers.
you posted it on
And
your
I'm going to
page.
There you go.
repost it
Yes.
again. Please go to Michelle Turner White on Facebook. If those of you who know me, go to my page and you can get the information. And I have posted it several times and will continue to do so. And we thank you so much for coming. Did you want to
Yeah.
share something else?
No, I really appreciate everything that you both have shared. And I think for
Yes.
me, what I will say, that's a whole nother story. And how do we help those who are the perpetrators? Because of the simple fact that the ones who have been sexually abused want some type of retribution.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. But I thank you for,
Well,
you
we're
know.
going to talk about it
Yeah.
next Friday.
Okay.
So
all right.
we have the Wayne County Sheriff's Department present, the Detroit Police Department, the prosecutor. We're going to have a full discussion around some of these themes and narratives on next Friday. So
Okay,
it's going to
good.
be very exciting. And again, space is limited, so we encourage persons to register as soon as possible. First come, first serve. And once we're at capacity, we're going to have to unfortunately close registration.
You have to wait till next year, so you better sign up now.
Well, thank you guys.
Thank
so
you all
much.
for
Thank
coming.
you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
being our guest. And we're good. We need more about this discussion because
Yes,
we need to get more into how we can help.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
And one of the ways we can help is get the knowledge, get the training to know how to help people. Don't just tell me, "Oh, I'm so sorry, you got a problem." You know, how can you help me?
And
Well,
tell
they
your
can go to
pastor to
therapy.
register. The
Yes.
Council of Baptist Pastors of Detroit and Vicinity is one of our main partners,
Oh,
as well
good.
as
Okay.
the Interfaith Leadership Council of Southeast Michigan. They are two of our clergy partners who will be with us. But if you are listening, tell your pastor
Yeah.
to register and be with
That's
us next
good.
Friday.
That's real
Wonderful.
good.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yes.
So Vanessa, we off.
We're on the
I've been trying to make it alright.